you're originally from Iowa.
My husband is from Ottumwa. He was born and raised here. I moved here in late '94 and met him in '95 at a writers group at the Ottumwa Library. So he writes poetry. And we lived here for a long time. We eventually moved to Indiana and then Illinois for his job. But we come back a lot. His mom is still here and my closest friends are here. So we come back several times a year. I usually try to make my book club's August meeting because that's when everybody comes together right before school starts. So Ottumwa was really important to me. I lived here a long time, and you make friendships in a town like this that you don't make in a bigger city. I had moved here from the DC metro area. So I just really liked it here and liked to come back, and finally set one book in an area similar to here. In fact, Ottumwa and its former bookstore are mentioned in the book, but it's set in a county that is very similar to Van Buren County. I spent a lot of time in Van Buren in 2008 after the floods because there was a lot of work to do down there, and met a lot of neat people and was so impressed by the fact that you can have such a rural county with these small groupings of towns. You know, there's not like a major center like there is in Ottumwa or even Appanoose County. So I just kind of fell in love with the place, and we were just there again last fall for the Fall Festival in October. So this book is set in a fictional county called South County, and it starts with someone getting fired from a newspaper, and then it's not giving away too much to say that the newspaper editor who fired her later ends up in a mulch pile on her first day at her new job. So I tend to write what they call cozy mysteries, which have obviously a mystery element, usually a murder, but not a lot of gore. My catch line when I talk about it is to say it's murder without maggots, because you don't have the CSI type of investigation. So this came out, and I've been doing a little bit of promotion and some book club meetings and things like that. And I've been really lucky. I go to a writers conference every year up in West Liberty, Iowa. And so I've met so many other writers from Iowa whom I didn't even know when I lived here. And that's been really neat. And they have taken an interest in this and helped me tell people about it. And I've been down to Van Buren County a little bit. But one thing that's also happened in the last few months, I was at a book signing in Indianapolis in December, I think it was, and I had this stack of my books there, and someone said, "How have you written so many books in just 4 or 5 years?" And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, I write every day. I mean, I'm semi-retired. I worked for Congressman Leach and then Congressman Loebsack. And when we left here in 2011, my husband said, "Why do you have to find a job somewhere else? Just finish a bunch of your books," because he knew I'd been working on several of them. So that's what I did. And it's not that I mean to say that it's simple, but it's just that if you do something every day, you can do a lot of it. And I still do other things. I do volunteer work, I help people, whatever. But after she asked me that, I wrote this short book, which is called Writing in Retirement, Putting New Year's Resolutions to Work. So after I'd been asked that question a few times, I thought about putting together something short that takes you through the concept of, okay, I have an idea to write a book. How do I even think about going about it? Do I want to publish it myself? Do I want to work with a publisher? And my books, for the most part, are self-published. This one is not. I worked with a neat publisher in Maryland, Annie Acorn Publishing. Small publisher, but she does a lot of books. And that kind of all comes together in this book that lets people know, yes, it's work. I mean, you have to put your tailbone in a chair and sit in front of the keyboard and do some research, even if it's fiction, and work, and then do a lot of editing. I do that, and I enjoy it. And then this also deals a lot with marketing. But the combination of the two coming out at once, I thought, well, you know, I'm going to come over and see some of my buddies in Ottumwa and let them know what I'm doing. A lot of people know, but a lot of people I met through the years here don't have a clue what I'm doing. It's probably not top on their list for what they're going to learn about, but the books are a lot of fun. And the fact that this one features Iowa and refers to places that you would know here, even has somebody come to shop at the bookstore in Ottumwa, I think there might be some interest. And I also do a lot of classes for people for free in self-publishing, because there are a lot of folks who have an idea and want to take off with it.
So how many books have you written?
I've written about 15. Most of them are fiction. A couple of them aren't. There's another book on writing. There's this one. Did a book on caregiving because I took care of parents with my siblings for many years. And the advantage of the current world of self-publishing and electronic publishing is that you can just keep putting them out there. I mean, I've sold tens of thousands of books. Who would have thought that a few years ago somebody could do that and do it fairly quickly? I'm not anybody's best-selling author, although I've had several books that have been bestsellers on Amazon for long periods of time, which is neat. And I sell them on other sites. I sell them on any retail site. Some in bookstores. It's kind of hard to get bookstores to pick up on self-published books. Usually it has to be an independent bookstore. O-Town Books was always kind enough to carry them when they were here. And there's a couple bookstores in Illinois that do, one in Missouri, just because I know somebody. And any bookstore can order them. But for the most part, I sell ebooks because people are willing to spend $2.99 rather quickly. But paperback books these days, you know, $7.99 is considered a good price. And people just don't want to invest that kind of money on a regular basis on a lot of books. And if you move a lot like we have, you don't want to pack them. So I do read a lot of paper books, and I'm at my library every week in Illinois. But I don't buy as many paper books as I used to.
And so, have you always been interested in writing? Is this something that maybe you've always wanted to do and you're just, was able to
You know,
start it?
that is a good question because I have been, and even starting in, I guess, about the mid-'80s, I started taking classes. And a couple of them were university classes, but for the most part, there are lots of independent organizations for writers or conferences and things like that. So I've taken a lot, and I've participated in them as a panelist and things. So you're always learning. I wrote a bunch of plays and screenplays in the 80s and early 90s. As I go back and look at them, they weren't very good. But luckily, I was smart enough not to try to send them to a lot of people to read. You have to realize that for any job that you have, you spend a lot of time preparing to do it. You can't just jump into something and think that you're going to be an expert at it in no time at all. You have to spend the time learning the craft. That doesn't mean you should put aside the writing until you think you can do it perfectly, because that will never happen. I don't care who you are, you're never going to write a perfect book. So you spend some time learning, you spend some time writing. If you have common sense, you don't have people immediately read what you write until you've shared it with other writers. I'm in a critique group in Illinois. I share with some people online. We read each other's books, usually other mystery writers, while they're in process. And writers are very good at giving criticism without wounding you. But you don't want somebody to read it and say, oh, wow, this is great, because they think it's great that you wrote a book. If that's what you hear, then you're probably not getting really good critiques. And you need those, because rewriting takes a lot longer than writing, in my opinion. So I took a lot of classes, got into it, and just kept moving.
And so, what is it like starting from back then and now, you have all these books out and people are reading them? What does that feel like to you that you've made it?
You know what's kind of funny is every now and then, it's been rare, but maybe 5 or 6 times in the last 2 years, now that I've been out for a while, I'll be at a conference or I'll be in a bookstore, or someone will even send me an email. That actually happens a fair bit. And they'll say, I read your book, I really loved it. I mean, the books get reviewed on websites and book review sites, but I was at a party for my brother-in-law in Maryland last year, and this woman came up and said, I've read your book and told all your friends about them. I didn't know her. If you think of the Kevin Bacon thing, whatever it is, 6 degrees of separation, she'd be like 5 degrees from me via my brother-in-law. But she'd heard of the books, she read them, she told all her friends. When those kinds of things happen, it's just really rewarding. And it's not that I think I'm such a big shot. I don't. I mean, I'm doing something that I like. I get to make a nice amount of money from it, not Nora Roberts type money, but nice, And people ask me to come talk to them at conferences. I mean, who would have thought a few years ago? And I don't have a big head about it. I mean, in this day and age, anybody, and I mean anybody, can take a shot at doing this.
And so, is this your only Iowa book that you've written?
No, that's a good question. I have another one, I should go out to the car and get it, called Searching for Secrets, that I did a number of years ago. And it's a good example of why you need to take your time and do this, because I put it out in, I was still working, in 2006, I think. And it was okay, but after I looked at it again, after I'd written a couple others, I thought, oh, this isn't very good. Well, in the world of self-publishing, I redid it. And I put out a new edition. It's called Searching for Secrets, Author's Preferred Edition. And there aren't very many of the old ones out there, which is good. And I get a lot of attention for that one too. In fact, the Gazette, the paper in Iowa City, someone called from there who heard me at a conference and said, our editor would like me to do an interview with you about writing this book and rewriting it and how self-publishing lets you do that. We're supposed to do that in the next week or so. So I think if you just put yourself out there a lot and try to say, I enjoy doing this, people will talk to you and read your books. And if your books aren't any good, then that's kind of the end of it. Your friends will read them. But if they're decent, and mine get better all the time. I mean, it's something that you learn, I think. I've had a lot of comments on this series about how much more sophisticated it is than my original series, the Jolie Gentil Cozy Mystery Series, which is set at the Jersey Shore. I love the shore. So those are good books, and they sell more all the time. But I am a more sophisticated writer after doing it for a lot of years.
And are you working on any books right now?
I'm working on a couple, 3 actually. I'm working on the second book in this series, don't have a title yet, but it is also set in this fictional South County, Iowa. I'm working on another book in the Jolie Gentil series, which takes the series several years down the road. And then I'm working on something I think is called Tipster for Murder, that has to do with somebody in a restaurant getting killed. I don't know why I leaned toward murders. Well, actually I do. My mother always read them, and she would always, you'd be driving down the road and she'd say, oh look, there's somebody delivering eggs. We lived near a rural area. She said, now if you were writing a mystery, you could deliver messages with those eggs, and then that would be a way that you'd find out who killed somebody. I mean, why she was thinking like this so long ago, I don't know, but it kind of got me thinking in the same way.
Do you find it difficult working on 3 different books all at once?
I do. The most I work on in one day is 2. And I try to divide it so that I'll work like 1 and then have a few hours and then another. And if I'm working on them in the same day, probably only work 2 or 3 hours on each book. And then a lot of times I'll just work on 1 because you get going. You have to really go with your own momentum. That said, if you wait for inspiration, or if you wait to feel like you can write a lot today, you won't get anything done. Maybe some people would, but I don't think most people would. So yes, it's not easy to work on 3 at a time, but I just decided if I want to take myself to the next level, I have to have 3 or 4 books a year instead of 2 or 3 books a year.
Anything else?
No, it's delightful being here and seeing everybody in town. I love to come to Ottumwa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.